don't really know these people, just to let everybody know, we're all struggling with the same issues. Obviously, when we have money, if we have money, we're trying to figure out where to spend. I think we all know out there and up here that the most important thing to spend on are the things that support making money. Whether you build new or whether you go back and you fix the old so it can support the new. We've got a lot of different perspectives up here from both sides of the aisle. Where I like to expand, where I work, we like to build big, not as big as these two or these three. Actually, I'm small up here as it relates to the size of us, but the money's the money. Let you introduce, I really don't know them, so let's introduce. Go ahead.
Hello, I'm Dominique Casimir, as they said. I'm with Jefferson Health. We're on the East Coast. We're a Philadelphia metropolitan-based organization and Lehigh Valley. We have currently right now 32 hospital systems, but we have 2 in the ground. So by the end of the year, we'll be 34 hospital systems. We're a little bit under 6,000 beds. We have 700 ambulatory sites throughout the portfolio. So we range all of Pennsylvania, except the western side and the south side of New Jersey.
I'm Clayton Smith, SVP Facilities at Children's Health in Dallas, Texas. We are a 2-hospital system in downtown Dallas, and we have a campus in Plano. We serve really the east side of the Dallas metro. We are currently in the ground of a $5 billion Dallas campus replacement project. That'll be 550 beds, about 4 million square feet, and we're planning to be in that thing in 2031.
Good morning, Jim Mladucky. I'm with Indiana University Health, Vice President of Planning and Construction. We are a 16 hospital system, about 500 care locations throughout the state. We are the largest healthcare provider in the state of Indiana. We take care of about 2,000 or 2 million of the 6 million people who live in Indiana. We are in the midst of building a brand new academic health center in downtown Indy. It sits on a 44-acre campus. We're spending $4.3 billion. It started in 2020, well actually it started in 2016 through the planning efforts. We broke ground in 2022 and we expect to open in 2027. So during that time, we're also investing in Fort Wayne, a new hospital in the northern Indiana, as well as some of our other facilities. But I'll turn it over to Lee and we'll start.
You don't really want to know who I am. I'll just moderate this. I'm Lee Levicoff, St. Luke's University Health Network Vice President, Planning and Construction, Real Estate, and basically jack of all trades. We are a little over $4 billion organization, 15 hospitals, 13 campuses, right outside Philadelphia, around 40 miles outside Philadelphia, and working our way into the Bucks County area. And if you're familiar, it's about halfway, and you're coming up my way, so we're going to have some
We're
fun.
frenemies.
Yes. But it's new. It's new. Right now, I think what we're going to do is, since these gentlemen and the lady on the end are actually actively looking at this kind of subject, because they're spending a lot more money than I am, which is good and bad, I guess. We're going to try and get to the ideas behind where to spend your money, how to spend your money. I think in my case, and maybe many of you out there, it's difficult to get the amount of funds you need and capital you need to go back, look at smart money, not money that you can't recuperate, but smart money. So for instance, when we went out into the wilderness, basically in the country area, it's basically a feeder hospitals that we build out there. It's not like it's not a waste station. We've got a few ORs, but it will eventually come back to the mothership. It'll eventually come back to the bigger hospitals. Those hospitals, we have one that's 165 years old, and we've got to pay attention to it. I think everybody, especially in Philly,
one that's 200.
You have 200.
Yeah.
You have Ben Franklin Hospital, right? They started them then. So we're trying to get an idea actively up here, but they're literally doing it. I'm sure you guys are all struggling with the same thing. I think we'll start with you, Jim. Actually, you're going to tell us how you did it, and you were able to do it, because I think it was smart, at least what I know, it's very smart, and many, at least the other three of us, have attempted to do it. You're now starting it, so we'll talk to the one that has done it or is
Right.
doing it currently. You'll tell us how you did it, and then both of us will say, we can't do it, we're just going to keep building. So go ahead, Jim.
So for me, well, what we did, our original hospital in Dallas was built in 1967, and we bolted onto it like everyone else has done over years. And we kept a bucket of about $6 million annually just for capital infrastructure. And we went through the same facilities condition assessment and risk ranking all of our assets and said, these are our highest risk assets to maintain or to
Did you
replace.
just say 6 million for
Yeah,
two buildings?
6 million.
I mean,
Again,
I don't know what that does.
but we just said we're going to burn through 6 million annually just to stay on top of these critical assets. And then in 2020, we started the planning of a new replacement hospital. And we went back to our capital team and said, instead of spending $6 million all the way through 2031, let's push that to the left and let's spend a lot of money in 19, 20, 21 and let that start to fall off so we can maximize the value we get out of that capital we spend. Knowing that we're going to basically abandon that campus after our new campus is open. So we convinced them to push that forward. I think we got $45 million over 2 years, and really hit it hard to take care of assets that had been neglected, like everybody else's are. But got to use that money quickly. We put a lot of projects in place, put a lot of infrastructure in, and got to see that value of it, or we will see the value of that work as we start to phase that campus out.
Okay. How did you do it?
We didn't do that. So no. So what we ended up doing is investing in other regional areas in Indy or in Indiana, built 4 different hospitals and invested in Riley Hospital for Children on the downtown campus, but literally left University Hospital and Methodist Hospital break fix. So if something happened, we fixed it. We did our best to do a risk register and understand what might be coming up, but the goal all along was to get out of those buildings and to build new, and so that's what we ended up doing. So we saved that investment and did what we're doing.
so we're a little bit of a hybrid because we're old and new. We got married to Lehigh Valley Health Network, and so we have a lot of new assets from the legacy Lehigh Valley. So they're micro hospitals. They're brand new, about 20,000 square feet to 22,000 square feet where they're brand new. But in the city where we are in Philadelphia, Montgomery County, Jersey, there's no new land. So we have to reskin or work with the infrastructure that we have. So it's a combination of both. So this year, we just received a commitment for the next 5 years to invest 80 to 100 million in our old stock portfolio, because in order for it to stand and maintain and attract the patients that we're seeking and evolve, we have to do it. And how we basically came to that conclusion is because it's an operational risk. It starts to impede on the services and the care experience that our physicians are able to do, and also the technology that's coming in. We have to be able to upgrade our infrastructure. So that commitment has been made. So we're just getting to the point where we're restocking and investing and maintaining in the way that we should have always done.
How do you pick what you fix?
So we went through the whole entire FCI index code just to really understand how are our buildings, are they good, great, in danger, or like failing? And we had to have a heart-to-heart with our operators as to what are you going to keep and maintain and what are you going to give up? Because we can't maintain everything. We have around a little shy of 30 million square feet. We cannot maintain everything. So we had to have a heart-to-heart as to what are we going to be? And it actually sparked a really great conversation where hospitals had to say, this is what we're going to concentrate on, and we're not going to do X. So we'll send that care over here. And so we had to have larger strategic conversations, but it really started with our CFO, our COO, and our president of our healthcare system really coming together to say, how do we solve for X? And how do we maintain care in places where we can never pull out?
And the feedback you get from the different presidents at each campus?
Um, my poster's probably somewhere with a target on it. Not everybody's excited because everybody, as you know, cares deeply about the work that they're doing. And so to say that we're not going to invest in the same level at every location equally is a very tough message. But it comes down to how do we survive long term, what's sustainable, and how do we reinvest. We have a very heavy Medicaid, Medicare population. So our commercial pay is not maybe what your system is. So we have to make things work. And so that means that we cannot be all things to all people, unfortunately.
As it relates to trying to sell someone on the investment of that money, when, for instance, when you did it, how did you get that 40, 60, 80 million dollars? What was the way you made them understand that the money, the good money, not the bad money, the good money is worth it?
I think we painted a picture of, where are we today versus, the thought was that, the old building, the 1967 building, is clearly falling apart, and the new building is actually the best we've ever had. We did the same thing through an FCI study, listed out where everything was, and said actually most what we have is in a good place. And if we said we're gonna target an FCI score of 75, I think is what we said, or 65. Everything was there minus one building, which was just 2 or 3 points off, and we knew what investment we could make to get it there and to keep it there. That's the right place to be. We don't need to be at 100. That doesn't make any sense to keep putting money into it just to get a score. And then outlined like those high risk areas, put risk ranking equipment based on its impact to operations and what we're here to do, and said, here's a clean list of what we have that is at that point of risking operations, and where the value is. And said if we can push this forward, we can be confident that we're not going to go in 2030, a year before we leave, and have to drop $4 or $5 million into an emergency fix.
How much of you experience where you're told at our level, you're told that you have to spend a certain amount of money at a certain hospital, and you look back or have people look back and you say, okay, what's the ROI on it? Whether or not it be a service you want to provide, or how long it's going to take the money to get back to us. So when you do an evaluation,
Sure.
which one plays in your mind? Because you're the big dog in Indiana. Is this the service, or is it, where do you have the balance between the service and the money that comes back to you?
Well, the service is absolutely important. It's our mission, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we also, there's an old saying, right? Without money, there's no mission.
No more.
Or the no margin, there's no mission thing.
Mm-hmm.
So our hurdle rate is 10%. I've been at other places where it's 12. So it goes through that filter. We have a standard form that's used for that evaluation, and it goes up through the board. So, everything has to be, there is a goal of that internal rate of return, and it has to go through that filter first.
So with the competition that we have,
Yes.
do we just secede a stand where we may not be able to compete, where there's a hospital that specializes in orthopedics, there's a hospital specialized in children, heart, whatever, and you've got a small percentage of that? You give up
I mean,
and spend it where it's smart?
I think that's what we're doing now. In Philadelphia, there's so many hospital systems. We have Penn, we have Mainline, we have Virtua, Inspira, St. Luke's. Christiana now coming into the market. We've been around for 200 years. A lot of our competitors have been around for the same time. we're not going out of business. The care is going to sustain itself. What we have done is exactly what you're saying. We focused a lot of our, I would say, community-based hospitals to have a specialty care. And everything else goes maybe into, like our complex system as a feeder. But we've basically, like for Frankfurt, we've repositioned our care because it's in the heart of the heroin epidemic in the country. And so we've specialized our care to really meet that demand. And we've outsourced a lot of the critical care. I don't want
It's
to
a
say
that is a
outsourced.
hell of a specialty, heroin. I mean, you have that market
It
cornered.
it's very interesting, but like the community partners that we work with are absolutely outstanding. But like a lot of our hard cases go to Torresdale, which is not too far down the road, like 5 miles down the road. So we're able to work that, but not every system can do that. And so I think it's interesting to your point about the hurdle rate. We've just instituted a business plan process where we have to work with the presidents, the regional presidents, to really kind of really think through what is the long-term effect. The demographic is shifting.
Hmm.
There's new populations that are coming in. There's populations that are getting older. How do we meet the care 10 years from now and making sure that we're making those investments now for where it's going to be versus just fixing things. Part of the Honickman Center, which we did, was really looking at what is this demographic going to be 10, 15 years from now. And we should start building that now. But we couldn't do that in a silo by ourselves. It really takes the whole entire system thinking about how are we going to sustain ourselves and who are we catering to, short term and long term. And that's how investments are made.
Hmm. So the record keeping is a problem for me, just on a personal level. So of all the hospitals we have and all the older hospitals,
Yeah.
where you can bring in a consultant that has every matrix there is and has all the math worked out. But if
Do
I
we
don't,
like consultants?
well, I don't. I don't use them as much because I try to get the guys in the hospital, the men and women in the hospital, give me data, but it's a hard thing to get. So when somebody says to me, okay, these 5 boilers are on their last leg and they've been on their last leg or past useful life, I want to know which one's breaking down, because if it's going to break down, I'm going to lose revenue and service. But I ask, how do you prove it? And I look at it, or have MEP engineers or whatever look at it, and they're like, okay, we don't have good record keeping here. We don't really know. Okay, so you go test it. How do we get better inside the hospital at that level, at the facilities level, to give us good data? Anybody try that yet?
I mean, one thing we're doing now is, we're focused on training our staff to job description based training. So if you're a plant operator, we're really focused. What does a plant operator need to know, and we're going to quantify that. And and it's all about investment in the staff, because your consultant will come in and tell you everything, and 3 different consultants will tell you 3 different things. But the people who are actually working on the equipment are the ones that matter, and they're the ones who always say, you get an old boiler tech. He tells you when it smells wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and when you're bringing in new people, which we all have the same problem of bringing in new people. How do you get that knowledge into them, but also quantify what that knowledge looks like?
You find the same problem I might have, where the guy that knows what it smells like
Oh,
doesn't want to teach that person.
Right, right.
well, they're leaving too.
Hmm.
Oh yeah,
That
their investment's not there anymore.
so, and the new crew, and I apologize if I'm over
Right.
talking anybody, but I, what I get heart palpitations about is not the buildings.
Mm.
It's about the people
Mm-hmm.
retiring, leaving, that have been with the systems for 30 years, that know it inside and out. I don't know about you, but it's hard to get that new generation in to work 5 days a week, odd shifts,
Let
and
alone
show
7
up
days,
consistently.
let alone be on call.
Yeah.
Right.
So for me, I think the biggest fear to everything, every investment that we're doing, is the next generation coming in and being able to handle the infrastructure and being able to be consistent. I think that's what we're not talking about. I don't know why vocations are not being pushed as much as
Mhm.
college, but there's not enough workers to come in and really learn a trade, which to me, is concerning for our industry.
I'd like to think that's changing. And, I think when we started this project in Indiana, we went and talked with workers and the unions and really invested in how we can bring the trades along. So I was telling Lee just before we got up here, Indiana is in an amazing spot right now. We have over $130 billion worth of construction underway. We've got battery plants, we've got other healthcare facilities, we've got downtown hotel going up. It's amazing, yeah. So Lilly is building their new Ozempic-like plant just north of us, 35 minutes away, investing $13 billion. So there's a trade war, so to speak, for us. But we are seeing that the unions have stepped up and have brought in many more people
Want to move to Indiana?
into that.
I do.
It's
I'm in
amazing.
Philadelphia.
No.
So
I
the
hear
unions
you.
are different.
Well,
No, but it's
I hear
great to
you,
hear.
but
We're just
they
sitting up here
partnered
being
with
envious.
us.
That's
No, I hear you. But they did partner with us, and they actually took. I was a little concerned 5 years ago, but it's really pipe fitters in particular and electricians have really stepped up. But that's where we see the retirement happening too. So but it's starting to turn over. We've got over 2,000 workers on our job site alone. So
You're in growth cities, so that's another thing. So your markets are growing and expanding. Mine isn't. So it's a different story because you have a lot of people that are attracting or being attracted to your market. I have a lot of retirees, which is great. I want to be one of those people. And
I am one of those.
and we're not getting as many youth. They're leaving for markets in your neck of the woods. So I think for systems that are similar to me, where we don't have that dynamic, it is something that we have
Real
to.
challenge.
It is a challenge that we have to be mindful of.
How do you do? How do you do down there in Texas?
I mean,
your people are moving too.
yeah,
Yeah.
we're growing constantly in North Texas.
Do you do any joint ventures with trade schools or anything like that? Because there's such an influx.
We've started to have those conversations, and I think that's something, especially as we look towards 2031 as our opening, and we'll probably start staffing that building in late 29. We've really got to beef that up and really look to the trade school to be a feeder for talent. The other thing we always say invest in technology, but our focus has been where the older generation of boiler operators can smell a boiler. They struggle when it comes to the technology side.
Oh yeah.
And the new generation can make an iPad do things that we didn't know it could do. And so how are we trying to bridge that gap of bringing in technology, investing in those kids, I call them kids, but investing in those new folks and kind of bring them along with that. At the same time, spend time with that older boiler tech to understand more of the nuance that maybe the data that you see isn't right, but you can see the equipment operate, and how do you blend those two things together and convince those old boiler techs to actually talk to the young ones.
Yeah,
that's the hard part.
That they can help each other out.
Yeah.
And again, that's where you start thinking, again, the C word, it's a consultant. So we've tried to do the same thing where I can bring somebody in, run the numbers, and the existing legacy person that really knows their things looks at these numbers and says, just inherently, whether it's instinct or not, and says that's not it. Or can train the young guy or girl right below him and say, that works for them. Now you do have them talking. As far as I'm concerned, that younger generation where we are is not necessarily interested in working for us in that sense. They'll take a high-paying job, great work-life mix, but where do I find that? How do you do that looking in the future? If you're looking out to 36 or 31, how do you get the work-life mix with the technology and the old school knowledge?
Yeah, that's the thing we struggled with, like everyone did during COVID, all these people went home to go work remote. But if you work in the hospital, you don't have that luxury. You have to be there. You can't maintain an air handler from the house.
Right.
And what I think we did a really good job during that time of connecting those support service groups like facilities and environmental services and security and those groups that have typically kind of been on the side behind the scenes, connect them into what we do and really fold them into this, like you may be working on an air handler, but let's go walk the floor of where you're working
Yeah.
Right.
and see the impact. And our clinical teams did a really good job kind of bringing them into the fold as opposed to, say, you guys stay in the behind the scenes kind of place. And like that, we talk about the mission, they really bought into the mission. So from an organizational level, making sure our team understands that the work they do really impacts kids' lives. And then from the department level, making sure that our leadership understands, we talk about inclusion and engagement, but like really lean into how do you make this team feel like a team? Like we're going out here together every day doing something big, and it takes everyone to do it. And
That's
we,
a cultural thing. I think
yeah,
we all work on that.
yeah, you've got to spend a
Yeah.
lot of time in the culture piece of it, which most of us are just a bunch of old grumpy men who,
Well,
Wait a minute,
people,
there's
and
some
women.
Yeah.
Sorry,
but
sorry.
that's not saying you're not,
We're not as grumpy.
grumpy.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can still be grumpy.
yeah, and
So how do you get the grumpy people, let's just say at the top, to give you the not only the money but the time and the wherewithal to make that culture come to fruition?
so we've got a couple of things. We've had
Are they involved in that group dynamic?
we've had some change at the top, which we've navigated some of those different feelings. We're at a point now, and probably have been for the last 3 or 4 years, with good leadership who understand that investment matters. And fortunately for us, we're very resource heavy. Pediatric medicine is a great place to be,
Mm-hmm.
and we have the ability to invest in them in ways that make sense to them. It's not always backpacks and jackets and that kind of stuff. They've actually said, I've got plenty of that stuff. I don't need any more. We found that finding a way to not only uh, you know food works for everybody, to feed them, but to show it almost as a service. So like one thing that we've done annually, we do an employee engagement survey. Ours is live right now. We set a goal early on that we're going to be 90% participation. I don't care what your score is, but we're going to get 90%. And the first year we hit 92.
Wow.
And I said, okay, 100%. And they said, well, 100%, how do you get everybody? I said, get everybody. And what we'll do is I'll cook steaks for everybody. And so we got a giant grill and set out there in August in Dallas
Oh, I'm coming.
and cooked. Last year we cooked 805 steaks for the team.
Well, you could walk next door at the farm and get that. We
But-
should go get that.
But and I'm thinking, we probably spent, a few $1,000s buying steaks and cooking for these guys. But when you walked up, and how many of those folks came to us and said, I just not only do I appreciate, a great meal, but that you sat out there and you started cooking at 6 o'clock in the morning for us, and you guys were part
Were
of
you at the grill?
yeah. And that's one thing we do. Our leaders are your servant
August in
leadership.
how much weight did you lose while this? It's like 200 degrees right there.
It
Yeah.
exactly right.
I
Exactly.
might-
We did figure out it. You can
might
take a
need to do
spot
that.
cooler though and park it next to the grill. That's not a bad move.
What did you do in Indiana?
Well, we do, obviously
For
focus
culture.
on, the patient or employee engagement too, but similar, I think we just, our team just finished an outing that we had at, a local venue where we brought everybody together and just celebrated what we've accomplished. So throughout design and construction, so we had, almost 70 people that attended, uh, and um, and we do that at least twice a year, and that does make a difference. When you're able to walk up and talk with people and see what's up, not only
I think that's
in
the
their
biggest
work
problem we
lives
have.
but in their personal
I
lives,
think it's
it
the
makes a
biggest
difference.
problem we have. When you have the people working facilities, which I don't have anymore, but the people in facilities, they really feel like it's untouchable anywhere higher than a certain level. And that's why you get that disconnect. I think that's why we're all trying to search for helping them. And then obviously helping them helps us. But if they feel like they're constantly saying, okay, I need bubble gum to fix this, I need that, and we're saying no, that culture needs to filter up too. And I have sometimes ran into situations, not at the president level, because we have, just like you, presidents at campus, because they're good at this. It's, but they know that they are not the ones controlling the dollars. Like you said, you'll give them $25 million for a campus. Say, that's discretionary funds. If you want to do a network initiative, we'll help. But it's a discretionary funds where they spend it. So I think, how would you go about?
Well, one thing so when I first came to IU Health 2016, what I noticed was that each region did get X amount of dollars, depending on the size, and those regional presidents and CFOs would hold that money until July. They would get it in June, or I'm sorry, they would get it in January, but they would hold it until July to see if they were going to make margin. And then they would release it. And then we would scramble for 5 months trying to get all of these things done because they had to give it back at the end of the year.
Sure.
So it's taken a while, but we've changed that culture, and we went to a similar facility assessment and did a risk assessment and put that together and helped the regional presidents understand that investing in facilities is just as important, because if the OR doesn't work, you're not going to make margin.
Right. Is that how you get it?
Yeah, we're a little different. I wanted to touch on the culture piece. I love what you both said. And we did that for the first time. We're a system where we've acquired 8 systems almost every other year. And so we have about 650 people on the team altogether. And this was the first time where we all came together. And wow, what a difference that makes. We're going through a lot of leadership changes. So our whole entire executive suite has flipped over like almost twice. So the culture has a lot of work to do. We have Neuro Leadership Institute working with us. But aside from that stuff, it's also about people just feeling like somebody has their back and that they can talk to somebody. So I love what you both said there. In regards to how we're set up now going forward, keep fingers crossed, and you guys can hold me accountable next year. We have different buckets. So IS&T, what we call information and technology, has their own bucket. Biomed has their own bucket, and we have our own bucket. And that is not anything to do with the president. So that's purely infrastructure, roofs, that like they cannot touch
More
that.
of a network thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
So then the presidents get their bucket, and that's to do anything strategic for growth initiatives, or they want to convert something over. That's their own bucket. That does not tap into our bucket.
Right.
And so that's the only way it can work, because otherwise we have that's exactly what got us into the position of deferred maintenance. Presidents wanted to hold on to it or use it for other things versus the leaky roof or the substation. And we said we need our own money and we'll be held accountable for it. And so that's how we work now.
We initially got to that point, kind of the I can't compete an air handler versus an MRI.
Correct.
I'm on the red side of the balance sheet and always will be. But we got there, basically taking advantage of emergencies. Don't let a burning platform go to waste. Once you have a failure, continue to lean into what's the cost of the next failure. If we lose the air handlers that support the ORs and we have to shut ORs for a week, what does that cost us? And that is what drove us to be able to say, here's our bucket of money. We're managing it. We're going to take care of it. We're going to do our very best to not have those emergencies.
Absolutely.
And then you guys go do whatever you want. And I'm not competing against MRs. I'm not competing against cath labs and things like that anymore.
Correct.
So
and I think that's very important.
Basically have to make sure that everybody, when you hurt like that, when something fails, and that wound everyone feels.
Yeah.
You basically have to reopen that wound.
Yeah, you poke that thing as many times as you can. So
and I know it doesn't go over very well. But if they consistently, and when we say they, we know who we're talking about, they consistently feel that pain, that's when they'll react. Right. If you just, as sad as it may be, we all know we have to solve the problem. We all know it's a fire. We have to put it out. But we can't just say, okay, it's fixed. Let's move on. It's fixed, but look what it did.
Right.
And then this is going to happen again over here. That's the hard sell. How do How do you get them to really feel it,
But
know it?
but it's
Because you
also
solve the issue so quickly.
it's also about the experience per square foot and how people feel when they walk in.
Mm-hmm.
And if they feel like, oh, this place has just been taped together versus this place has been cared for and loved. Like when you're coming into a facility hearing great news or horrific news, you want to feel like that facility can support whatever it is you have going on. You don't want to be in a dated room. You don't want to feel like you have dated infrastructure. And I feel like the experience per square foot starts the minute you park your car.
But they're seeing that. But behind the wall, we all know what's existing. I understand they come in, and you're right. We all want that. But we have to convince the people above us that behind the wall is more important. What you're seeing at a time.
But I think the surveys, the customer surveys also speak to that.
Sure.
Dated facilities or facilities that have
Whether it's
not been-
hot or yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, understood.
you're going to see that data point. And
Mhm.
so if you want it to change, you have to make these investments. They're non-negotiable investments that just have to be done. It's kind of like the stuff at your house that you have to do that you don't want to do. But, like my husband, like he has to do certain things. Sorry, guys. He doesn't want to do them, but it has to be
Does he
done.
finish them when he starts them?
He has no choice. He has to do it with
Okay.
me. But it's just these are the non-negotiables. And I think once people understand that and they start to get the surveys back and they start to get the ratings back, and that matters. All of these things matter. But if people don't see the correlation, or if you're not telling your story about your buildings, I think that's where people see the disconnect because they just see it as one item versus a holistic experience.
Have you ever deferred a facelift, let's just say, for the rooms and for something that would be maintenance
Oh,
or
Absolutely.
okay. So when you get your surveys back and they say this piece of furniture, I sat down and almost went through the bottom of it, but I didn't complain about the fact that the room was hot and that room was cold, and how do you balance it?
I think your corrective maintenance, you make a good point about how the space looks. And every one of us, if you're in this world, when you go into a building, especially a medical building, you're looking for, sprinkler heads.
Oh, sure.
And you're looking for exit signs and you're looking for dings in the wall. And if our team is focused on that and we're really managing our corrective maintenance, it may be old. It may be dated. It may be the color palette of 1983,
Mhm.
but it's put together and it doesn't look, because I'm sure all of us have been in those places that it literally is taped to the wall,
Mhm.
or there's a leaky ceiling, a
Tile.
ceiling
Yeah.
tile, or there's something that like, how do you work in this? And then you don't feel like this building is here to support me. And so, getting your team on that mindset as well as if we're taking care of the stuff people can see, it's easy to take care of the stuff people can't see
Mhm.
because like you said, we've got the money to manage the big stuff. But
Mhm.
I gotta have a team out there that's really looking for those little things that make our patients and our patient families feel like they're supported.
And there truly is a perception. When you walk in,
Oh, yeah.
are you going to get good care? Is it clean?
Right.
Mhm.
That's the first thing that
Mhm.
happens. Is my room clean? How's the food? Those things actually matter.
Oh, yeah.
So, and then I think you're right. I think if you pay attention to those things, then the other things come naturally and they follow. Now, you still have to keep working at it, no
Mhm.
question about it. Before I came to IU Health, I was at Northwestern Medicine, and they did a similar project in the late 90s with Feinberg-Galter. What the university did and Northwestern Healthcare, they went out and they wanted to move from 20th ranking to in the top 10, by U.S. News and World Report. What they found is facilities mattered a lot to the faculty, to the patient,
Can you send me that report?
I'm happy to have, happy to do that. And so that's when they said, you know what, we need to invest in a new academic health center in downtown Chicago, and they did. It opened in 1999, and then it probably took about 10 years, but by 2008, 2010, they were in the top 12, and now they've been in the top 10 ever since.
And they're good at getting colleges. They're good doctors too.
Sure, yeah. Well, how do you
This
how do
question
you bring doctor? How do you
How you
bring
Is
and keep the
technology.
best? Yeah. How do
is
you
what it is.
how
Yeah.
do you bring and keep the best of the best?
And speaking of technology, you're looking at this building here. It just happens to be a building, but it's really a smart building. And this is what we want our footprint to be like going forward. It's the first, I would say, neurodiverse patient experience building that we've designed.
That's
We reverse engineered it. We started with the patient first, then the caregiver, then the technicians, nurses, doctors, the engineers and architects came last so that we could really build it so that you're not a patient in the building, but we're a guest in your lives for the day. We partnered with Microsoft so that it could be very tech savvy. So we know you have arrived before you even arrive by your phone.
Mhm.
There are no waiting rooms. It's neurodiverse lighting and furniture fixtures, because one of the things that we realized in our market is there's a lot more adult autistic
Mhm.
that
Sensory.
yeah,
Oh, absolutely.
sensory,
Mhm.
and nobody's thinking about that aspect. And we've also partnered with the Ritz-Carlton in regards to how do we redesign our footprint to accommodate people as they come in and exit. How do we make it the best experience possible? If that's our new standard, you have to invest in the technology and infrastructure so we can attract the talent. But I think what a lot of us are dealing with is the capital,
Oh my God.
and you're
It's a good
competing.
idea, but you have to pay for it.
You're competing with capital, and trust me, we are paying for that building.
Oh, I can imagine.
But the capital, and depending on whether you have margins like you do, or you're like me where we're like scraping to get by,
Mhm.
that's a real conversation about how you're going to do tax exempt bonds if you're a nonprofit organization, how you're going to look at alternative financing
Mhm.
and what that cost comes with. And you have to recognize that there's a lot of systems that aren't going to make it because they're not having those tough conversations. And so I think it's a really interesting time to be in our industry to see how things will move forward and how we're going to look at margins differently. Because when I look at my uncles and how they practice and what they were able to make versus what you're practicing and what you're making now, it's
Mhm.
different. And depending on the market too, depends on the income. Like if
Oh,
we
absolutely.
picked up our buildings and we landed in Indiana, we'd be at a different margin.
Mhm.
And so I think as we navigate through these conversations, we cannot have the conversations without having the cost of capital in play and all the different financing vehicles that are available to us when your margins are tight.
Did you find in that building, since it's a real smart building, it's now like a super smart,
Yeah.
that back to the original thing we were even talking about, where you can smell a boiler almost, and I'm just metaphorical.
You could smell a boiler.
Yeah,
Oh,
to the point where you might not need 50 people in facilities
well, we have
that have to be taught by the 70 people that were there before. Can you go down to 20 people that are on their computers? And I know they're going to see something like that. I mean, that's the only thing I'm thinking could help this situation, in a sense that the building talks to them instead of them talking to the building.
It is, but we still have our crew that likes a wrench on them,
Sure.
and to just kind of touch a pad, it's almost too complicated. We overcomplicated the
But the new
system.
generation's not going to do that. So
The new generation's not
they're
going
going
to
to
do
enjoy a
that.
building like this.
They're going to love a building like this, but we also need people to be educated on how to do it.
Oh, sure.
And that population is so small
Yep.
that we're almost putting ourselves in a corner. Thank God we're linked with the university where we can train a lot of people, but they leave for your markets.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, they leave for your market. They leave for other markets. So our retention factor is huge because we're constantly churning, unfortunately,
So
because everybody gets educated in Philadelphia, but then they leave.
is it because of cost to stay?
I think it's opportunities
Mhm.
and the cost of living in other places
Yeah.
versus what you can get.
So building a not Ritz-Carlton next to you, Jefferson Hotel. Would that work? Keep the rent low, make affordable. That might be a thought. There are hospitals doing that. I've seen they're doing that. It's like creating a city of their own.
Mm-hmm.
That might be something, but we don't have the land to do that unless you buy a building. Or
Yeah, and
but you're doing anything?
we are.
Oh, you are. Okay, go ahead.
So part of this project, Dennis Murphy, the CEO, said, if we only replace our hospital, we've failed. It has to change the health and trajectory of health in Indiana. We're 41st least healthy in the country, highest infant mortality rates, probably some of the highest cancer and obesity rates in the country. And so we've been partnering and we've created what's called the Indy Health District. It's 1,700 acres in downtown Indy. We're partnered with Children's Museum of Indianapolis, with our local energy, CEG, Citizens Energy Group, with Ivy Tech, which is our community college, with the neighborhoods that are right around Methodist Hospital. And we're not only building a new hospital, but we're looking at housing and partnering with developers to do affordable housing that's close. So
We're,
you can
we're doing that
actually,
right now.
can
believe it or not.
actually, yeah. And so
It's the only way to keep them.
create, right, exactly, yeah. Partnered with IPS, the school system in Indianapolis, to set up a feeder program for high school kids. So they, at 9th grade, they get their lab coat. Part of their curriculum is to come to the hospital and to learn. And then we pay for their secondary education at Ivy Tech if they want to be a technician or a nurse practitioner, or not a nurse practitioner, an LPN.
Yeah.
And they're guaranteed employment when they get out of school.
I would love to talk to you more about that, because we're just at the brink of designing. I don't know how many of you are into blue zones, but blue zone campuses and wellness zones.
Right.
So that to me sounds like a wellness comprehensive zone. Would
Yep.
love to further talk about how you were able to make it work and the partnerships. We're just at the brink of that.
When
Yeah,
we're doing housing, we're actually knocking down some buildings to create parks and trying to get them from those apartments to the hospital in a green area.
Right.
So these things can work. I mean, it's what we preach anyway. It's wellness.
Right.
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 And
Yeah.
that becomes your infrastructure. So it's not a boiler. I got to plant new plants or put a
It's-
bench in.
Yeah, but it's part of it, right? To your
Yeah.
point, right? So if you look at how health is measured, and access to care is only one part of that. So policy, how you feel about your health, and how the environment, actually, clean air, clean water, job safety, all of those things are part of that.
And that's this generation's coming up. That is the apple for them. That'll get them here.
So
Any questions from the audience about anything here? We've got a microphone over here.
Oh,
What you're going through, maybe?
we got one.
There you go.
Hi, I'm Brian Weldy, and in the healthcare business for 27 years. And Dominique, I'm interested about your $80 to $90 million you had set aside for deferred maintenance projects, and you had a facility condition assessment. So, what percentage of that is being funded? How much is the big pie of needs for deferred maintenance compared to what you got funded for?
okay, so our big pie of deferred maintenance is about $1 billion. So that doesn't sound great when I say
No.
80 million.
How did you know that?
But what? Yes.
But we're doing the critical non-negotiable. This is going to be our first year really doing that, where we're not fighting with the presidents on like MRIs or biplane projects. So we could start to chip away at the critical features of what needs to be done in order for the envelope to exist. So this is something that came from the legacy Lehigh Valley side, health network side. So they had a system that worked, that chipped away. So they were able to consistently put away. So I say this to say, now this is a bucket that we no longer have to fight for. We used to have to fight every year for this or that. And they understand that it's going to cost us more if we don't chip at it every year. So
Good. So how did you convince, what was the way that the management team was convinced to put aside the $89 million? Because you had to pitch that and make a business case for it and get that support. What was the magic
I will say
bullet
it was
points
our
you did?
CFO and our COO that really saw the need for it. Because they understood that if we didn't handle this, it was going to become a bigger problem later that nobody would be able to finance. And the president of our health system as well saw it as like, I can't get new land for all of these critical buildings. What am I going to do to upgrade these facilities and recruit new docs? So they had to see it, but I have to say the risk analysis was so helpful to say, hey, if you don't put the money in, this is gonna die. Where are you gonna have these services?
And that
Once
risk
they
analysis
understood,
has to be
yeah,
a lot of homegrown.
yeah,
It can't just be and that's where we were talking. What you're looking for you're looking for the soup that puts. You're looking for the magic potion.
I think I heard you say
What do you say?
fear is the key, right?
fear is
Yeah,
the
and
key.
that's what we talked about here. You've got to keep that wound open.
Yeah.
You've got to keep poking that so they feel it. Otherwise, they're just going to forget that you solved that problem. You're going to move on to the next one. There is no magic potion. Yeah, you almost have to hope that something fails to almost catastrophic.
But I'm happy to
It's
share with
terrible
you
to
a
say.
template that we've done so that you could see what we did for one of our hospitals, so you can use it, see if that works for you.
Closing comments or anything?
Just looking for questions right now. The closing comments. I mean, I think everybody probably has a comment, has been through this kind of stuff. So obviously, hope you learned something about it, or at least some of us have learned up here the hard way. Got a question over here?
Okay, last question.
That's a lot of pressure. Last question.
Yes.
My name is Nathan Saxton. I've been in the industry only about 5 years, so I'm still picking up some stuff. Speaking of bringing new talent in, have any of you had any luck or tried partnering like with your local or regional ASHI chapter on bringing in young talent?
Yes. I will say that has been successful for us, but the volume that we need
Not enough.
versus what's coming in is not enough. We've tried partnering with vocational schools
We've done
as
that too.
well.
Mhm.
It's just the volume that trickles down. And so there's a lot of people that sign up, but there's not a lot of people that complete and qualify.
Right.
And then stay. So that's where we're having the gap. But ASHI is a wonderful organization, and we found them to be helpful on multiple fronts.
You come from a union or open shop area? So it's open shop. So you have the ABC down there?
I don't know what that is.
It's the American Builders. Yeah, it's basically
I'll
basically
look into that.
what the union does versus what the open shop does.
Yeah, we have more local associations, but I'll look
Yeah,
into
that's a good avenue right there too. And they do tend to stay more often than the ASHI guys.
All right, my friends. Well, we are out of time, so let's hear it for our panels this morning. Thanks, you guys.